The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night when Rosa finished mopping the last row of seats in the concert hall. Her back ached from bending over chairs for the past 4 hours, but she didn't mind the work. There was something peaceful about cleaning this grand theater after all the fancy people had gone home. The Goldberg Concert Hall was the most beautiful place Rosa had ever worked. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, and red velvet seats stretched out in perfect rows. But the real star of the show was the black grand piano that sat alone on the stage, gleaming under the soft lights. Rosa had been cleaning here for 3 years, ever since she moved to the city to take care of her sick mother. Every night she would save the stage for last, just so she could spend a few extra minutes near that piano. She would dust it carefully, running her cloth over the smooth wood and shiny keys, humming quietly to herself. Tonight was no different. As Rosa climbed the steps to the stage, she could still smell the expensive perfume from the evening's concert. A famous pianist had played tonight, some big shot from Europe whose name she couldn't pronounce. The audience had clapped so loudly that Rosa had heard it from the cleaning closet backstage. As she began dusting the piano bench, Rosa found herself humming a melody that had been stuck in her head all week. She had heard it on the radio while getting ready for her morning job at the diner. The tune was sad and beautiful at the same time, like a conversation between an old friend and a memory. Rosa didn't know it was called Nocturne in E-flat major by Chopin. She just knew it made her heart feel full and empty at the same time. As she hummed, her free hand began moving in the air, her fingers dancing to the rhythm only she could hear. "That's a beautiful piece you're humming there." Rosa jumped so high she nearly dropped her cleaning supplies. A tall man with silver hair stood in the doorway watching her with curious eyes. She recognized him immediately. It was the famous pianist from tonight's concert, still wearing his black suit and bow tie. "I'm sorry, sir," Rosa said quickly, her face turning red. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I'll finish up and get out of your way." The man walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. "No need to apologize. I forgot my sheet music and came back for it. But I'm glad I did. You have a lovely voice." Rosa looked down at her cleaning cart, feeling embarrassed in her simple uniform next to this elegant man. "Thank you, sir. I heard that song on the radio and couldn't get it out of my head." "Ah, Chopin," the man said with a smile. "One of my favorites." "I'm Victor, by the way." "Victor Chen, Rosa," she replied softly. Victor walked around the piano, running his hand along its edge. "You know, most people can't hum classical music so perfectly, especially not a piece as complex as that nocturne." "Do you play piano?" Rosa shook her head quickly. "Oh no, sir. Nothing like this." She gestured toward the grand piano. I have an old piano at home. Nothing fancy." "An old piano is still a piano," Victor said, his eyes twinkling. "Would you like to try playing that melody you were humming?" The question hit Rosa like a lightning bolt. Touch this beautiful instrument. This piano that was worth more than everything she owned? "I couldn't, sir. This is for real musicians, not people like me." Victor laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. "People like you?" "Rosa, music doesn't care about fancy clothes or expensive schools. It only cares about what's in here." He pointed to his heart. Rosa looked at the piano keys, so white and perfect they seemed to glow. She thought about her grandmother's old upright piano sitting in her tiny apartment, the one with 3 keys that stuck and a middle C that sounded more like a whisper than a note. That piano had been her best friend for 15 years, ever since her grandmother taught her to play Happy Birthday for her 8th birthday party. "I really shouldn't," Rosa said, but her voice was weaker now. "Tell you what," Victor said, sitting down on the piano bench and patting the space beside him. "I'll play it first, and then maybe you can show me how you would play it. Just for fun." Rosa watched as Victor's fingers found the keys. The melody that had been playing in her head all week suddenly filled the entire concert hall. But something was different. Victor played it perfectly. Every note was exactly right, every timing was precise. Yet somehow it felt cold to Rosa, like looking at a beautiful painting behind glass. When he finished, Victor turned to her with a proud smile. "Your turn." Rosa's hands were shaking as she sat down next to him. The piano bench was softer than any chair she had ever sat in. She looked at the keys, so clean and bright, and thought about all the famous musicians who had touched them. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "Just close your eyes." Victor said gently, Forget about where you are. Forget about me watching. Just think about that melody and let your fingers find their way. Rosa took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother, who had died 2 years ago, but whose hands Rosa could still feel guiding her fingers across the keys. She thought about all the nights she had played that old piano after her mother had fallen asleep, pouring her heart into music because there was nowhere else to put all the feelings she carried. When her fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. The same melody that Victor had just played perfectly began to flow from the piano, but now it was different. It was still Chopin's nocturne, but it was also Rosa's story. It was every morning she woke up at 5 to work at the diner. Every night she cleaned these halls. Every time she counted pennies to buy her mother's medicine. The notes seemed to dance in the air around them, filling the empty concert hall with a sound that was both heartbreaking and hopeful. Rosa played like she was having a conversation with an old friend, her fingers finding notes and harmonies that made the melody deeper and richer than any sheet music could capture. When the last note faded away, Rosa opened her eyes to find Victor staring at her with his mouth slightly open. The silence in the hall was so complete that Rosa could hear her own heartbeat. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Victor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rosa looked down at her hands, still resting on the keys. "My grandmother taught me when I was little, but mostly I don't know. I listen and try to feel what the music is trying to say." Victor stood up slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement might break the spell that Rosa had cast over the concert hall. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the empty seats, shaking his head in amazement. "In 30 years of performing," he said quietly, "I have never heard anyone play with such soul." Rosa felt her cheeks burning. "I should go, sir. I still have to finish cleaning the lobby." But as she started to gather her supplies, Victor turned back to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. It was like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her. "Rosa," he said, "would you mind if I asked you to play something else?" Rosa's hands trembled as she looked at Victor. The famous pianist was asking her to play more. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost midnight and she still had work to finish. But something in Victor's eyes made her pause. "I don't know many pieces by heart," Rosa said softly. "Just the ones I've heard enough times to figure out. Play whatever feels right to you," Victor encouraged, settling back into one of the front row seats. "Pretend I'm not even here." Rosa turned back to the piano, her heart racing. She thought about the music that lived inside her head, melodies she had collected over the years like precious stones. There was one piece that always made her think of her mother, something she had heard on the classical radio station that played late at night when she couldn't sleep. She didn't know it was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. She only knew it as the song that sounds like crying and laughing at the same time. As Rosa began to play, she forgot about Victor watching from the audience. She forgot about her aching back and her tired feet. She forgot about everything except the story the music was telling her. The melody started soft and gentle, like her mother's voice when Rosa was a child and had bad dreams. But then it grew stronger, more determined. Like the day Rosa decided to move to the city to take care of her mother after the doctors said she couldn't live alone anymore. Rosa's fingers danced across the keys, finding harmonies she had never learned from any book. The music swelled and dipped, telling the story of every sacrifice she had made, every dream she had put aside, every moment of beauty she had found in the middle of struggle. The concert hall seemed to come alive around her. The crystal chandeliers caught the light differently, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Even the empty seats seemed to lean forward as if they were listening to a secret being shared. Victor sat frozen in his chair, his eyes wide with amazement. In all his years of training at the finest music schools in Europe, in all his performances at the world's most prestigious venues, he had never heard anything like this. Rosa wasn't just playing notes. She was painting pictures with sound, telling stories that made his heart ache with their honesty. As the music reached its peak, Rosa's whole body swayed with the rhythm. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't notice them. She was lost in a world where her grandmother was still alive, where her mother was healthy again, where dreams didn't have to be put aside for survival. The final notes echoed through the hall like a prayer, growing softer and softer until they disappeared into silence. Rosa sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the keys, her breathing slow and deep. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Victor began to clap, slowly at first, then faster. His applause filled the empty hall, bouncing off the walls and coming back to them like an echo of appreciation. "Extraordinary," Victor whispered, standing up and walking back toward the stage. "Rosa, that was... I don't have words for what I just heard." Rosa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, suddenly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I got carried away. I know it wasn't perfect." "Perfect?" Victor climbed the steps to the stage, his face full of emotion. "Rosa, what you just played was beyond perfect. It was real. It was alive. It was everything that music should be, but so rarely is." Rosa looked confused. "But I made mistakes. I could hear some of the notes weren't quite right, and the timing in the middle part was probably wrong." Victor sat down beside her on the piano bench. "Let me tell you something I learned too late in my career. Technical perfection is easy to find. Concert halls are full of pianists who can play every note exactly as it's written on the page. But what you have, this gift of making music feel like it matters, that's something that can't be taught." Rosa shook her head. "I'm just a cleaning lady who plays an old piano in her spare time." "You're the real musician, am I?" Victor asked, and Rosa could hear sadness in his voice. "I've spent 40 years learning to play music exactly the way it's supposed to be played. I've memorized thousands of pieces, won dozens of awards, performed for presidents and kings. But when I played that nocturne for you tonight, it was just notes on a page. When you played it, it became something alive." Rosa didn't know what to say. She had never thought of her playing as anything special. It was just something she did to feel less alone, to make sense of all the complicated feelings she carried around inside her. "Where did you learn to feel music like that?" Victor asked gently. Rosa was quiet for a moment, thinking. "My grandmother used to say that every piece of music is really someone trying to tell you something important. She said the trick wasn't to play it the way you think it should sound, but to listen for what it's really trying to say and then help it say it better." Victor nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was a wise woman. She worked her whole life in factories and diners just like me," Rosa said. "But when she sat down at that old piano, she became someone else. Someone who could make beautiful things happen just by touching some keys. And she taught you to do the same thing." Rosa smiled for the first time since Victor had discovered her. She tried to. "I don't know if I'm any good at it." Victor stood up and began pacing across the stage, his mind racing. "Rosa, I have to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Rosa tensed up. Was he going to report her for touching the piano? Was she going to lose her job? "Have you ever thought about performing? I mean, really performing in front of people?" Rosa laughed, but it came out more like a nervous hiccup. "Me, perform? Sir, I clean offices and serve coffee. I'm not a performer." "But you are," Victor said, turning to face her. "What I just witnessed was one of the most moving performances I've ever heard. And I've heard some of the greatest musicians in the world." Rosa shook her head firmly. "That's very kind of you to say, but this isn't my world. Look at me." She gestured to her simple cleaning uniform, her worn shoes, her hands that were rough from years of hard work. "I don't belong on stages like this." Victor was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Can I tell you a secret, Rosa?" She nodded. "When I was your age, I thought I belonged on stages like this because I had the right training, the right clothes, the right connections. It took me 20 years to realize I was wrong. I belonged on stages because I could play notes correctly. But you belong on stages because you can make people feel something real." Rosa felt a flutter of something in her chest. Hope, maybe, or fear, or both mixed together. "I wouldn't even know how to begin." "Neither did I when I first started," Victor said. "But I had teachers and schools and people who believed in me. You've had none of those things, and look what you've accomplished on your own." Rosa looked out at the empty seats, trying to imagine them filled with people. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. "I can't even afford nice clothes, let alone piano lessons or anything like that." Victor was quiet for a long moment, and Rosa could see him thinking hard about something. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful and gentle. "Rosa, what if I told you there might be a way? What if there were people who would want to help someone with your gift?" Rosa felt her heart start to race again, but this time it wasn't from the music. It was from the dangerous, wonderful possibility that her life might be about to change forever. 3 weeks later, Rosa's life had turned completely upside down. It started when Victor couldn't stop thinking about that midnight encounter at the concert hall. He had called his manager, David, the very next morning. "You have to hear this woman play," Victor had insisted. "She's something special." David was used to Victor discovering new talent, but he had never heard such excitement in the pianist's voice. So when Victor suggested they quietly record Rosa during one of her late-night cleaning shifts, David agreed to set up a small camera in the concert hall. Neither Rosa nor Victor expected what happened next. The video of Rosa playing that beautiful piece was supposed to stay private, just for David to see. But someone at the recording studio posted a short clip on social media without permission. The caption read, "Night janitor plays piano better than most professionals." Within 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. Rosa first learned about it when her neighbor's teenage daughter knocked on her apartment door, holding up her phone with wide, excited eyes. "Miss Rosa, Miss Rosa, you're famous, look." Rosa stared at the small screen, watching herself play the piano in the concert hall. Her heart sank into her stomach. She had been so careful to keep her two worlds separate, her day job and her secret love of music. Now everyone could see her in her cleaning uniform, sitting at a piano that cost more than she made in 5 years. The comments under the video were a mixture of amazement and criticism. Some people wrote things like, "This gave me chills and most beautiful thing I've heard all year." But others were less kind. "Why is a janitor touching that expensive piano?" And, "She probably shouldn't be allowed near that instrument." Rosa's phone began ringing constantly. Reporters wanted to interview her. Strangers found her social media accounts and sent her messages. Her boss at the diner where she worked mornings pulled her aside to ask if she was really the woman everyone was talking about online. The worst part was the attention at the concert hall. Rosa had always loved the peaceful quiet of her nighttime cleaning job, but now other employees whispered and pointed when they saw her. Some were kind and curious, but others seemed to think she had done something wrong by playing the piano. "I never wanted this," Rosa told Victor when he called to check on her. "I just wanted to clean the hall and go home. Now everyone's watching me, judging me." Victor felt terrible. He had only wanted to help Rosa, to show the world what an amazing talent she was. He hadn't thought about how overwhelming sudden fame could be for someone who lived such a quiet life. "I'm so sorry, Rosa. This wasn't supposed to happen this way." "I know you meant well," Rosa said, but her voice sounded tired. "I just don't know what to do now. People are expecting things from me that I can't give them." But the video kept spreading. Music teachers shared it with their students as an example of natural talent. Classical music lovers debated whether Rosa's emotional playing was better than technically perfect performances. News stations picked up the story of the janitor pianist and wanted to do features about her. Then something unexpected happened. A famous music critic named Helen Rodriguez wrote a long article about Rosa's video. Helen was known for being tough and honest about classical music, and musicians around the world respected her opinion. In 30 years of reviewing classical performances, Helen wrote, "I have rarely heard such authentic emotional expression. This unknown woman has reminded us all why music exists, not to show off technical skill, but to connect human hearts to something larger than themselves." The article changed everything. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about a janitor who shouldn't be touching expensive pianos. It became about whether the classical music world was too focused on fancy schools and perfect technique, and not enough on genuine feeling and natural talent. Music schools started debating whether they were teaching students to play music or just to copy it. Piano teachers wondered if they were helping their students find their own voices or just turning them into machines that played notes correctly. Victor found himself at the center of these conversations, and they made him uncomfortable. Reporters asked him what he thought about Rosa's raw, untrained style compared to his polished professional playing. The questions felt like they were asking him to choose between his life's work and the truth he had discovered that night in the concert hall. "Rosa doesn't play despite her lack of formal training," Victor told one interviewer. "She plays beautifully because she hasn't been taught to hide her emotions behind technical perfection. Maybe the rest of us have something to learn from her." Meanwhile, Rosa tried to continue her normal life, but it was getting harder every day. The diner where she worked was suddenly full of customers, who came hoping to see the famous janitor. Her manager at the concert hall didn't know whether to praise her for bringing attention to the venue or worry that she was becoming a distraction. The most difficult part was that Rosa genuinely didn't understand what all the fuss was about. She had been playing piano the same way for 15 years. She hadn't suddenly become a different person just because someone recorded her and put it online. "I'm still the same person I was a month ago," she told her mother one evening as they sat in their small apartment. "I still have the same job, the same bills, the same old piano that sounds like it's falling apart." Her mother, who had been watching the news coverage with pride and worry, took Rosa's hand. "Maybe you're the same person, but the world sees you differently now. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" That question kept Rosa awake at night. Phone calls came from people offering her opportunities she had never dreamed of. A record company wanted to sign her to make an album. Concert venues offered her performance opportunities. A wealthy music lover even offered to pay for her to attend a prestigious music school, but every offer came with conditions that made Rosa uncomfortable. The record company wanted her to wear elegant dresses and take professional photos, turning her into something she wasn't. The concert venues wanted to advertise her as the Cinderella of classical music, like she was a fairy tale character instead of a real person with real struggles. "They want to change me into someone I'm not," Rosa confided to Victor during one of their phone conversations. "They want the story of the poor janitor who became a princess, not the actual person who just loves to play piano." Victor understood her frustration because he was dealing with his own questions. For the first time in his career, people were asking whether his technically perfect playing was somehow less valuable than Rosa's emotional honesty. Some critics even suggested that classically trained musicians like Victor had lost touch with what made music meaningful. "Maybe we're both learning something from this," Victor said thoughtfully. "You're learning what it's like when the world pays attention to your gift. I'm learning what it's like to wonder if my gift is enough." As the weeks passed, the initial excitement of Rosa's viral video began to fade, but the questions it raised didn't go away. Music schools started offering scholarships specifically for students who showed natural talent, but couldn't afford formal training. Some established musicians began incorporating more emotional expression into their performances, inspired by Rosa's example. But for Rosa herself, the most important question remained unanswered. What was she going to do with all this unexpected attention? She could go back to her quiet life of cleaning and playing piano in private, or she could step into a world that wanted to celebrate her talent, but might also try to change who she was. The choice would determine not just her future, but what her story would mean to all the people who had been moved by her music. Rosa stared at the letter in her hands for the 10th time that morning. It was from the Central City Symphony Orchestra, inviting her to audition for their upcoming season. Not as a novelty act or a feel-good story, but as a serious candidate for their guest soloist program. The letter had arrived the same day as 3 other offers. A popular morning talk show wanted her to play piano, while celebrities talked about their problems. A streaming service offered her money to star in a reality show about ordinary people with extraordinary talents. A major music label promised to make her the next big thing in crossover classical music. All the offers came with one thing in common. They wanted to package Rosa as a story, not celebrate her as a musician. "I don't know what to do," Rosa told her mother as they sat at their small kitchen table, surrounded by unopened letters and printed emails. "Everyone wants something from me, but I can't tell who actually cares about the music." Her mother picked up the symphony orchestra letter and read it again. "What does your heart tell you about this one?" Rosa was quiet for a moment. "It scares me the most. They're not offering me money or fame. They're asking me to prove I belong with real musicians. And do you think you belong with them?" Before Rosa could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message from Victor. "Can you meet me at the concert hall tonight? I have something important to show you." Rosa arrived at the hall just as Victor was setting up a small recording device near the piano. He looked nervous, which was unusual for someone who performed in front of thousands of people without breaking a sweat. "What's all this about?" Rosa asked, gesturing toward the recording equipment. Victor took a deep breath. "Rosa, I've been thinking about everything that's happened since that night we met. All the attention, all the offers, all the pressure you've been feeling. Okay. I realized something. I've been part of the problem. When I first heard you play, I immediately wanted to help you get recognition, but I never asked what you actually wanted. Rosa sat down on the piano bench, running her fingers along the smooth keys. I'm not sure I know what I want anymore. A month ago, my life was simple. I knew exactly who I was and what I was supposed to do each day. And now? Now I feel like everyone else knows who I'm supposed to be better than I do. The record companies want me to be a crossover star. The talk shows want me to be an inspiring story. Even some of the classical music people want me to be proof that you don't need training to be a real musician. Victor nodded slowly. That's exactly what I was afraid of. So I have a proposition for you. Rosa looked at him curiously. I want you to make a recording with me, not for any company or label or TV show, just for us and for anyone who wants to hear music played the way it's supposed to be played, with honesty. What do you mean? Victor sat down beside her on the bench. I mean, we record an album of duets together. Pieces that we both love played the way we want to play them. No marketing team telling us how to dress or what story to tell, just two musicians making music together. Rosa felt a flutter of excitement mixed with terror. But you're Victor Chen, you're famous. Why would you want to record with someone like me? Because you've taught me something I had forgotten, Victor said quietly. I had spent so many years learning to play music perfectly that I stopped playing it honestly. That night when you played for me, I remembered why I fell in love with piano in the first place. Rosa thought about all the offers scattered across her kitchen table, the symphony audition that terrified her, the commercial opportunities that felt wrong, the choice between staying safe in her quiet life or risking everything for music. What would we record? She asked. Victor smiled. Whatever moves us. I was thinking we could start with that Chopin nocturne, the one you were humming that first night. You could show me how to play it the way you hear it, and I could help you with some of the technical details that might make it even more beautiful. You want to learn from me? Rosa, I've been playing piano for 40 years. And that night was the first time in decades that I heard someone play with complete emotional honesty. Of course I want to learn from you. They spent the next hour playing together, taking turns at the piano and sometimes playing side by side on the wide bench. Victor showed Rosa techniques that could help her reach notes more easily and make smoother transitions between phrases. Rosa showed Victor how to let the emotion of a piece guide the timing instead of sticking strictly to the written rhythm. It's like having a conversation, Rosa said as they worked through a section of Mozart together. You say something, then I respond. Then we find a way to say something together that neither of us could say alone. Victor watched Rosa's face light up as she talked about music, and he realized something important. All the offers Rosa had received were asking her to perform for other people, to be entertaining or inspiring or educational. But music, real music, was something you did with other people. Not for them, Rosa, Victor said carefully. I want you to know that whatever you decide about all these opportunities, I support you completely. But I also want you to know that you don't have to choose between being true to yourself and sharing your gift with the world. What do you mean? I mean that symphony audition doesn't have to be about proving you belong with real musicians. You already are a real musician. It could be about finding other real musicians who want to make beautiful music together. Rosa was quiet for a long time, her hands resting on the piano keys. I'm scared, she admitted. What if I audition and they reject me? What if I'm not as good as I think I am? What if you are exactly as good as you think you are, but you never find out because you were too afraid to try? Rosa looked out at the empty seats of the concert hall, the same seats she had been cleaning for 3 years. She thought about her grandmother, who had played piano in factory break rooms and church basements but never got the chance to see how far her music could reach. If I do this recording with you, Rosa said slowly, and if I audition for the symphony, I want to do it on my terms. No reality shows, no inspirational story angles, no marketing campaigns about the janitor who became a star. Just music, Victor agreed. Just music, Rosa repeated, and for the first time in weeks she felt like she could breathe again. Victor began setting up the recording equipment while Rosa warmed up at the piano. As her fingers found the familiar melody of the Chopin nocturne, she realized something important. She wasn't choosing between her old life and a new one. She was choosing to let her music be heard by people who could understand what she was trying to say. Are you ready? Victor asked, his finger hovering over the record button. Rosa nodded, her hands positioned over the keys. Let's make something beautiful. As the recording light turned on, Rosa began to play. But this time she wasn't playing alone in the quiet of an empty concert hall. She was playing with someone who understood that music wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. 6 months later, Rosa stood backstage at the Central City Symphony Orchestra, adjusting the simple black dress she had borrowed from her neighbor. Her hands were shaking, but not from nervousness this time. They were shaking from excitement. The audition had been 3 months ago, and Rosa still remembered every moment of it. She had played Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5, the Emperor Concerto, with Victor accompanying her on a second piano. The symphony's selection committee had sat in complete silence as Rosa poured her heart into every note, playing not for their approval, but because the music demanded to be played. When she finished, the conductor, an elderly woman named Professor Martinez, had tears in her eyes. "In 40 years of conducting," she said quietly, "I have never heard anyone make Beethoven sound so human." Rosa got the position not as a guest soloist, but as the orchestra's featured pianist for their upcoming season. More importantly, she earned the respect of musicians who had dedicated their entire lives to classical music. The recording she and Victor had made together had been released quietly, with no big marketing campaign or media interviews. They called it conversations because that's what it sounded like. Two friends talking to each other through music. The album found its way to people who loved real music, and slowly, word spread. Tonight was Rosa's debut performance with the full symphony orchestra. As she peeked through the curtain, she could see the concert hall filling up with people. Some were classical music lovers who came to every symphony performance. Others were people who had discovered Rosa through her viral video and wanted to hear what she could do with a full orchestra behind her. In the front row, Rosa spotted her mother, wearing the nicest dress she owned and looking prouder than Rosa had ever seen her. Next to her sat Victor, who had turned down his own concert that evening just to be there for Rosa's debut. 5 minutes, Miss Rosa, the stage manager whispered. Rosa nodded and walked to the small mirror hanging on the backstage wall. The woman looking back at her seemed different from the tired janitor, who had been discovered humming while cleaning 6 months ago. But in all the important ways, she was exactly the same person. She still lived in the same small apartment with her mother. She still played her grandmother's old piano every morning before work. The only thing that had really changed was that now she had found people who understood what she was trying to say with her music. Rosa had turned down most of the commercial offers that kept coming in. No reality TV shows, no pop music collaborations, no inspirational movie deals. She had kept only the opportunities that felt true to who she was. Recording with Victor, performing with orchestras that respected her artistry, and teaching masterclasses for young musicians who couldn't afford expensive lessons. The symphony had even created a scholarship program in Rosa's name, providing free music education for working-class students with natural talent. Rosa insisted that the scholarship recipients learn not just technique, but how to find their own voices in the music, places. "Everyone," Professor Martinez called out. Rosa walked onto the stage to find the entire orchestra already seated and ready. These were some of the finest classical musicians in the country, and over the past months, Rosa had learned that they were also some of the kindest people she had ever met. They had welcomed her not as a curiosity or a charity case, but as a colleague who brought something special to their music. The audience applauded as Rosa took her place at the concert grand piano. The same type of piano where this whole journey had started, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it felt like home. Professor Martinez raised her baton and Rosa placed her fingers on the keys. The opening notes of the Emperor Concerto began with the full orchestra, creating a sound so rich and powerful that Rosa felt it in her chest. When her entrance came, she didn't think about technique or timing. She just listened to what the music was telling her and let her fingers respond. As Rosa played, something magical happened in the concert hall. The piece that she had practiced hundreds of times with Victor suddenly became a conversation between her piano and 60 other instruments. The violins seemed to answer her questions, the cellos echoed her emotions, and the timpani punctuated her most dramatic moments like an old friend agreeing with everything she said. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every note. But Rosa wasn't playing for their approval. She was playing because this music had something important to say about struggle and triumph, about finding beauty in difficult places, about the way human hearts can soar even when life tries to weigh them down. In the slow second movement, Rosa found herself thinking about her grandmother, who had taught her that music was a way to speak when regular words weren't enough. As her fingers moved across the keys, Rosa felt like she was having one last conversation with the woman who had started her on this incredible journey. The final movement built to a crescendo that filled every corner of the concert hall. Rosa and the orchestra moved together like they had been making music as a team for years, each musician supporting the others while still maintaining their own voice in the larger conversation. When the last note faded away, the silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then the audience exploded into applause that seemed to go on forever. People stood up, wiped away tears, and clapped until their hands hurt. But the moment Rosa treasured most came when the orchestra members put down their instruments and joined the applause. These musicians, who had performed with world-famous soloists for decades, were giving Rosa a standing ovation of their own. Professor Martinez walked over to Rosa and took her hand. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for reminding all of us why we fell in love with music in the first place." After the concert, Rosa found herself surrounded by people who wanted to congratulate her. Music students asked for advice. Other pianists wanted to know her secret. Audience members shared how the performance had moved them. But the conversation that meant the most to Rosa happened when Victor approached her as she was packing up her sheet music. "Rosa," he said, "I need to thank you for something." "Thank me? You're the one who helped make all this possible." Victor shook his head. "You gave me back something I had lost without even realizing it. Tonight, for the first time in years, I remembered what it feels like to play music instead of just performing it." Rosa smiled. "My grandmother used to say that music isn't something you do to other people. It's something you do with them, even if they're just listening." As Rosa walked out of the concert hall that night, past the same stage door where she used to enter with her cleaning supplies, she thought about how much her life had changed and how much it had stayed the same. She was still the same person who believed that music was a conversation between hearts. She still played piano because it was the most honest way she knew to express what she felt inside. She still woke up every morning grateful for the gift her grandmother had given her. The only difference was that now she had found her place in a community of people who understood that real music isn't about being perfect. It's about being true. And as Rosa walked home to her mother and her grandmother's old piano, she knew that this was just the beginning of the conversation she wanted to have with the world through her music.